Welcome back to the Bible in History. I'm Jeff Johnson, and with me today, of course, is my mother, Rebecca Johnson. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the pyramids of Egypt specifically. As we've discussed, there are many pyramids across the world, so we're going to narrow that down to the pyramids of Egypt. I'm going to begin by reading Genesis chapter 12, verse 17. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. This connects Abram, or Abraham at the time, to the pharaohs of Egypt, which I find a very interesting thing. Abram came to Egypt and rather quickly got to know the Pharaoh of Egypt, so he had some prestige there in Egypt at the time, which is
indeed
fun.
Yes. So the reason we wanted to point out this connection to the pharaohs is, according to Josephus, the historian. Now, let me preface by saying I don't agree with everything Josephus says. Nevertheless, there are some things that are intriguing.
Indeed.
And a possibility. He claims that Abram actually brought the mathematics necessary for the construction of the three great perfect pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the very least, we do know Abram and Sarai had pretty close relations with Pharaoh, and I think we mentioned last time it's Pharaoh Khufu.
Yeah.
So, to the point that Sarai lived in Pharaoh's house because he took her for his harem, and God obviously stepped in because Abraham had told a half-truth, while Sarai was technically his half-sister. At the point of their marriage, they became one flesh and not brother and sister any longer. I know that's kind of creepy to us today, but remember, people married, they're half-siblings, they're cousins, right up through the Regency period of England.
Yep.
So
I think it's very...
It's definitely a way to keep the money in the family.
Yeah. I think it's important in this particular scenario, and what the Bible is trying to teach here is this concept of be sure your sins will find you out. And I just really quick want to go off on a side tangent. Yes, Abram told a half-truth, but it wasn't the full truth. And this caused, once Pharaoh found out, he kicked Abram out of Egypt, if I remember correctly. Like, his reputation went down pretty hard and pretty fast. And so even though it might seem like, it's just a little white lie, it's to protect somebody. It's gonna bite ya. It's gonna bite ya. That'll come back when you least want it to, when you least expect it, and it's gonna sting pretty hard, even if it is a half-truth. It's just a half-truth. I told them some of it. I just misled them a little bit. It's still gonna hit pretty hard someday. And you don't know when that is. For Abram, it came back pretty quick. For others, it took a little while. And it bit them, and they're like, where'd this come from? Well, you remember, 20 years ago when you told that half-lie. It's coming back now. So, sins are bad. Even just little white lies.
Yes.
God doesn't have levels of sins. God has sin. And they're all equally bad. Just side tangent there. But we are going through the Bible, and I think we should learn some truths from this. From history. Learn from history
totally
or
agree.
repeat it. And we see here some history that we don't want to repeat.
I love it. That's great. If Josephus is correct, and Abram was the one that supplied the mathematics to make the pyramids possible, That's fascinating.
It is, yes.
But regardless, we know Khufu was the pyramid builder. So, regardless, Abram would have seen them in the process.
Yeah.
At some level. So he saw the stuff that all of us wonder about.
Yeah.
So the pyramids are pretty fascinating, and while they're not directly mentioned in the Bible, obviously Egypt is mentioned often in the Bible. But the pyramids themselves are not mentioned. It's interesting. What is mentioned is the treasure city of Pithom and Ramses, which we'll talk about later. But the actual pyramids were not. So, I thought, as much as we all love the pyramids, let's find out some interesting things about the pyramids. Because we have repeatedly said on this podcast that the pyramids, or the ancient groups of people coming out of the Tower of Babel before the flood and all that time period, were extremely advanced.
Yes.
And the pyramids are certainly proof of the advanced technology that was available to them. And lest you be among the people that have been hogwashed into believing with chisels and they managed to make the pyramids. They weren't tomatoes with no hands. You're getting your information from VeggieTales. Let's get some real facts. So let's get a little bit of information about these magnificent things. The only existing 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only one still in existence today, is the Great Pyramid.
Which is an incredible
the
feat.
Great Pyramid.
To stand this long, just barely after the flood, these things have been standing. And yeah, the Great Pyramids are a little bit less than they were, but not much. And so that in and of itself is a fantastic feat. I don't think there's anything from that time period that is really still standing with
intact. No.
Yeah. Anything that still exists from that time period is buried under dirt and just rubble and ruins and foundational walls and whatever.
Right.
And these are still fully intact. So that's incredible. So yeah, let's get into what these things are, because they're incredible.
They are. The Great Pyramid, the main one, is 30 times larger than the Empire State Building. They are so large they can be seen from the moon.
Which is huge. Which is huge.
The base of the Great Pyramid is 13.6 acres, or 5.5 hectares, equal to 7 Midtown Manhattan city blocks. Each side being greater than 5 acres, or 2.2 hectares in area. A highway 8 feet wide and 4 inches thick could be built from San Francisco to New York and put inside the Great Pyramid. That's 4,677 kilometers, or 2,906 miles of road that you could stack into the Great Pyramid.
It's a lot of road.
Just to give you an idea of the size of this thing. As we mentioned, it is the sole remnant of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It is built to face true north, which means they had to have a way to know true north.
Yeah, because true north is different from the magnetic north. So if they were going off the compass, it'd be off. So they had... Basically, it proves that they knew, the Earth was a globe, and they explored it. They knew
round, guys, round. Globe means round.
Yeah.
Just in case you didn't know. I know there's a whole group of you idiots coming up called flat earthers. Yeah, we disproved that a long time ago. Get over yourself.
Basketball style ball. And they explored the world. Not only did they know, it was a globe, but that it was. They bend places. They knew where the true north was. So it just. A lot of things that were just like, oh no, they lived in Egypt, they stayed in Egypt, and they did Egypt. No, they did the North Pole. They were way up there. They probably knew what the South Pole was. So, a lot of exploration, a lot of technology.
Exactly. And on that line, here's another interesting thing. The Great Pyramid is located at the exact center of the Earth's landmass. That is, east-west axis corresponds to the longest land parallel across the Earth, passing through Africa, Asia, and America. And similarly, the longest land meridian on Earth through Asia, Africa, Europe, and Antarctica also passes right through the pyramid. Since the Earth has enough land area to provide 3 billion possible building sites for the pyramids, the odds of it being built where it is 1 in 3 billion.
Yep.
Yeah, don't tell us they didn't
They knew stuff.
go anywhere or travel.
And that requires, I mean, to get it precisely like that, that requires a tremendous amount of math, like we were talking with Abram coming in. I mean, exploration, you need to know the size of the world, you need to know all kinds of different things. And so that exploration comes in very important in all of that, knowing how far it is from the North to the South Pole, because you gotta find the middle point, and then just so much that goes into that. And again, this is right after the flood. So these people came out knowing these things.
Yes, they were incredibly intelligent, incredibly advanced. Let's get into advanced. Like 20th century bridge design, the pyramid's cornerstones have ball sockets built into them to give them flexibility.
Sway and stuff.
There are several football fields long. The pyramid is subject to expansion and contraction from heat and cold, as well as earthquakes, which do happen in that part of the world. After 4,600 years, the structure would have been significantly damaged without the construction of ball and socket joints.
Mm-hmm.
So that advanced, and I'm putting that in air quotes because we think we know everything. And yet God has been very clear there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there it is. So,
and that again, that leads into the knowledge of now we're dealing into again mathematics, and this is a knowledge of geography and the tectonic plates, knowing that you are going to be dealing with earthquakes in this region, and this is engineering, dealing with how to deal with the destructive power of an earthquake long enough to keep these things standing, relatively damage-free for over 2,000, or close to 2,000 years. Well, that's a tremendous amount of work and knowledge.
Yeah. It's interesting because it isn't just the pyramids that can withstand earthquakes.
Yeah.
We have a friend who's from Peru. He grew up in Peru. He grew up near one of the megalith sites in Peru from the ancient Peruvians, the ancient inhabitants of South America. And he remembers many times earthquakes hitting that region. And they, of course, would run outside, and modern structures just fell to crumbling bits. And yet the megaliths still stand, and they wouldn't even move.
Mm-hmm.
They would just kind of float with the earth. So they had an ability that we don't even have today when it comes to earthquake-proof buildings.
Yeah.
Their things are still standing. And how quickly in an earthquake in the Middle East have we seen, well, anywhere, have we seen buildings just crumble?
Oh, yeah.
Like gingerbread, you know. So,
and those buildings have only been standing for a couple of years, like since the last earthquake.
Exactly.
Down they go.
And they claim to be earthquake-proof, many of them. And yet we see earthquake-proof to a point. But you hit beyond that point, they can't handle it. And yet here the pyramids and other megalith structures like the pyramids are still standing.
Yeah.
So they had some serious technology we just don't get. The bulk of the pyramid's core was constructed of 4,000 to 40,000 pound blocks of limestone, soft limestone. But a 40,000 pound block. Now, I understand that most of you grew up hearing that they put logs and they rolled the logs and they rolled it along and some guy ran up in front and shoved the log in front. 40,000 pounds is going to snap the log. I don't care how many logs you put on it. I believe personally, and there are many who do, number one, they had machinery that we just don't recognize. Mm-hmm. We don't recognize it. It could be we've actually stared right at it and not known what it is. Just because it doesn't look exactly like our machines today.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that.
The design... the design of what they made could look very different from what we did. Even though the technology and what it was doing is very similar to stuff we can do, the appearance could look completely different. And many things that we know about look completely different just because of who's making it.
Right.
Different people have different ideas about how things should look and what looks good or what is functional. And so these things look very different.
Exactly. There is also a theory, and one that I wouldn't say no to, that they understood the properties of levitation. We use a magnetic levitation type device in bullet trains in Japan. They kind of float. They've actually brought some here into Brazil now. We have a line that, if you saw Sao Paulo, it's kind of crazy because it's just stacks of different transports. And at the very top of all the stack of transport, you'll see something similar to the bullet train in Japan. It's floating. And so it has been proposed that they knew how to levitate 40,000 pound blocks with certain magnetic principles that we just have lost.
Yep.
So you can't assume that they were hunter-gatherers and went out with their little chisels and chiseled away. If you look at the block cuts, you can see the clear signs of modern, like, laser cutting of the blocks.
Yeah.
Because they were cut with precision that you can't get with
the
a chisel
hammer
and a hammer.
These things are made to fit perfectly together. You don't get that perfection with a hammer and chisel. You get that with laser style precision and a laser itself.
Yes.
Like, you got just tiny little bits of give that you have to fit these as precisely as these are, especially if you're talking about being able to sway with earthquakes and all this kind of stuff. Like, these things need to be millimeter perfect. And they are.
And they are. Yeah, the stones are cut within a 0.01 or 1/100th of an inch of perfection.
Yeah.
That's laser cutting, guys. At nearly perfect right angles on all 6 sides. Placed together with intentional gaps of 0.02 inches. A modern building company cannot do this. They cannot place 20-ton stones with greater accuracy than they placed in the pyramid. And they can only get up to 20 tons. And we're talking 40,000 pounds. And modern machinists have studied the cutting on the stones and concluded something similar to modern machines or lasers had to have been used to cut these stones. And we ignore that because anthropologists want us to believe they were hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
Which
is crazy to me. Like,
evolutionists convince you.
We're talking about actual engineers who work with this stuff and like, yeah, you couldn't do this with the hammer and chisel. We've tried. And then we're like, no, the anthropologists said they can't, so they didn't. It's like, no, modern engineers have tried this.
Yeah.
They can't. It just boggles my mind. Even the professionals can't agree because one group is looking at this strictly from a point of they have to be.
Right.
this technologically advanced. There's no way they could be more technologically advanced. And that's just, it's unprovable to them that they could have been even more. Even though other professionals are coming in and saying, no, that's impossible, we've tried.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So, people?
The pyramids, yes. The pyramids are something that we could use, and our time is up today.
Yeah.
And there's so much more about the pyramids. It's fascinating. I may even talk a little bit more about it next week, because it is one of the most concrete evidential proofs of how advanced civilization was at this time.
Yeah.
And how much evolution has rewritten our history. And evolutionists and anthropologists are promoting their religion as a historical and scientific fact, when in fact it isn't. So don't be swayed by that. That is not the truth. Believe the Bible. They were very smart.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to next time.
Indeed. We hope you enjoyed this week, and we hope you'll join us next week. We have a lot of fun stuff, and I hope you can see that we have a lot of fun giving you this information. We enjoy it so much. So we hope you'll join us next week. If you have any questions, you can ask us in the comments in YouTube below, or you can email us at thebibleandhistory@gmail.com. We'd love to try to answer those questions for you. So please, please, please ask them. We love answering them. Join us next week, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe to our channel.
You can also follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and Google Podcasts.